a thrill for me because I hadn't seen it in many, many years, and certainly not in this condition. So thank you for the Venice Film Festival for allowing us to screen the film and make a new print. That was great. Thank you.
This was, and thank you to the projectionist for having done this. This was your first film with Martin Scorsese. I mean, it's the beginning of one of the great American cinema collaborations. Can you talk about your meeting and your work on the film?
Well, what happened is I saw Mean Streets at the New York Film Festival back probably about 1973 or 4. And I was very taken because, A, the quality of the film and the performances and the passion of the film, but also on a personal level, in a scene right before the De Niro character gets murdered by a shot. He was in a room and there was a poster behind him with a gun pointing down at his head. And it was a poster from one of my early films called Point Blank. And he used my poster to tell what was going to happen to the lead character. So I was very impressed with that.
And can you tell a little bit about the production of the film? And one of the things is that it's remarked by a text, a piece that Martin Scorsese wrote for our catalog, is that the original release, it was a shorter version, and then scenes were added to afterwards.
Yeah, well, we originally released the film very limited in America, and then we took out the happy ending sequence and released it without the happy ending sequence, and then we decided to put it back in because we thought it would have a bigger reception, and it didn't. As a matter of fact, and the song New York, New York, which is almost the theme song for the city of New York, almost didn't happen because when we hired Kander and Ebb, who were friends of Liza's because they had written Cabaret, and we asked them to write this big song in the major key, which is what De Niro keeps saying he wants to write a song in a major key. And they wrote this just very, very little ditty, and we said we needed a big dramatic song, and they didn't want to interfere with the Leonard Bernstein, Compton and Green song, New York, New York, a Wonderful Town. But they finally did, but after the film came out, we couldn't get any airplay on Liza's version of New York, New York. And then 2 years later, Frank Sinatra asked Liza if he could copy it and record it himself. And she said, of course you can, nobody's playing my record. And Frank Sinatra recorded it 2 years later. That's when the song became the international hit it became.
And your collaboration with Scorsese evolved to Goodfellas till today. You've done 6 films together, and then
we did The Raging Bull after New York, New York, and then we did Goodfellas, and then more recently we did The Wolf of Wall Street, Silence, and of course we have coming out in the fall The Irishman, which really unites Marty, myself, De Niro. Bob and I started our first film together in 1974 in a movie called The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight. So that's a collaboration. Also on The Irishman, Al Pacino co-stars, and so does Joe Pesci, both of whom have worked with Marty and I for many, many years.
Can you give us a hint of how this collaboration works? How do you two approach a film? You've done so many together, and Raging Bull, Goodfellas, all the big ones till today.
Well, sometimes we fight. Most of the times we don't. We come from the same kind of background in New York. Most people know that Marty Scorsese comes from the Lower East Side of New York, which is really renowned for the kind of Italian immigrant in America. His parents were from an immigrant family, and I come from a place in Brooklyn called Coney Island, which is more of a Jewish enclave that basically has the same ethnicity. So we have the same kind of bones. And the same thing is true of Bob De Niro. So we kind of come from the same place. I think we have the same temperament and the same feelings about the stories we want to tell.
How would you describe the temperament and those feelings of yours?
When he gets excited, I'm calm. When I get excited, he's calm. Kind of like a marriage in a way.
Both you and Martin Scorsese started making films at the beginning of what has been, considered a very golden time for American directors and American cinema. You know, you started in the late '60s and in the '70s. So you lived that era where there was an enormous amount of freedom for the filmmakers.
Yes.
Can you bring us a little bit about how things have evolved and what are the difference between the creative power of a filmmaker then and now?
Well, I think what happened is the old Hollywood studio system was really falling apart by the time I got to Hollywood in 1966, 67, to make my first film, which was with Elvis Presley. But to give you an example how chaotic it was, I was in the music management business, and we got a hold of a script that was really written for a star that we were involved with by the name of Julie Christie, who was a great actress. And we gave the script to the head of MGM at the time, and he called me and said he read the script, but he didn't want to do it with Julie Christie. But what did I think about the idea of doing it with Elvis Presley instead? So I said, you mean the script I gave you with Julie Christie, you want to do with Elvis Presley? He said, yeah, what do you think about that? I said, that's the best idea I ever heard. And he said, how quickly can you get out to Hollywood? But that's how crazy it was in those days. There were no rules anymore. The studios were really, had been destroyed by the two things: television, which came on about 10 years earlier, and the fact that they had lost the star system. All the directors, the writers, the actors that had been under contract to the studios were all gone, and they were all free now. So the studios didn't quite understand and didn't have the apparatus to deal with them. So the independent producers like myself and the independent directors like Scorsese, Coppola, Spielberg, Bogdanovich, Friedkin, they all came along and really had great success. True, when you examine the 70s that the new directors made, they were the biggest blockbusters that had come along in decades. Jaws from Spielberg, Godfather, just going through them, the Last Picture Show with Bogdanovich, Friedkin's movies. It changed the whole outlook of Hollywood.
Do you miss that sort of confusion that gave so much creative freedom, or?
Well, what happened was with the collapse of the studio system, which was very controlling, the new directors came along, and frankly, there was nobody to tell us no. We just went out and did it.
And there is another film that you did in the 70s. I mean, Irwin Winkler has done over 50 films. It's amazing. His filmography is daunting to look at, and but there are some big ones. And another one that was a product of the 70s is Rocky.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, and so can you tell us about the genesis of Rocky?
Well, Rocky was really a film that we made through a series of really lucky circumstances. We interviewed Sylvester Stallone as an unknown actor who just had done very few small parts in very few films. And he came, and we didn't have a job for him, and as he left our office, he said that he was a writer in addition to being an actor. Well, he didn't seem like a writer, not that I know what a writer seems like, but he certainly didn't seem like one. And he said, I wrote a script, and if I sent it to you, would you read it? And he sent over a script he wrote, which was not Rocky. And we thought the writing was really, really very good, very passionate. So we said, you know, we thought your writing is good, but it's not a script that we want to do. And he said, I have another idea to do a story about a broken down fighter. So we invited him to come in and tell us the story, and it was the story about Rocky. And he said, I would write the script for you for nothing. Well, right away it sounded pretty interesting. And he said, I will do it for nothing, but I have one requirement, and that is that I have to star in it. Well, we said, we can't lose anything here, so we encouraged him to write the script and promised him that if we liked it and we wanted to produce the movie, he could star in it. So he wrote the script in a very short time, and we gave him our notes, and he rewrote it, and we decided we wanted to do it, and the studio didn't want to do it. They said, why in the world would we make a movie about a broken down fighter who is in love with an ugly girl who works in a pet shop? And I think it was more Bob Charnock and I, who was my ex-partner, really were just being very stubborn. And we had a deal with the studio, which shows you how chaotic it was. We had an arrangement with the studio if we didn't make a studio for them in the first 9 months of our deal with them, we could put a picture to them. What that means is we could give them a script as long as the picture was not X-rated and it was under $1.5 million in budget. They had to finance it. They didn't have any choice. That was our arrangement. Again, that was how chaotic things were in those days. And what happened is, so they read the script and they didn't like it, but we said, okay, it's less than $1.5 million, you have to finance it. So of course they did a budget, and they said, well, we did a budget, it's $2 million, not $1.5 million, so we don't have to finance it. Well, at that point we were really angry and determined to make the movie. So we went back and we said, we'll make it for $1 million and we will guarantee any cost over that. So they were not obligated beyond $1 million and they were forced to make the movie. So Rocky, which is now in its 8th series, was made because we really were angry at the studio for not making it.
Rocky,
I'd like to say we thought it would be a big international success, but frankly, I had no idea.
But this was a big international success, a proof of vision. Can you mention a major blunder that you did, or some talent, someone's talent that you didn't see?
The first film I did was with Bob De Niro back in 1974, but that was a mistake because I had a script written by a Pulitzer Prize winning writer by the name of Jimmy Breslin called The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, which was a book about a group of gangsters in New York that couldn't do anything right. They were really incompetent. And I had the script written by Waldo Salt, who had written Midnight Cowboy, a great, great writer. I had this great script. And I got a call from an agent, and he said, I have a perfect choice for you to direct The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight. I said, who is that? He said, Francis Ford Coppola. I said, wait a minute. Francis Ford Coppola, what in the world makes you think that I would hire him for a gangster film? Well, I didn't hire him, somebody else did, and did The Godfather.
The mark, I'm going to open it to the public soon, but I just want to go off a little bit further on this. The mark of a great producer is also how much he can and support and encourage, experimentation and advance in technology. And you've been associated with some films that were incredibly technological challenge. And I'm thinking one of the big that comes to mind is The Right Stuff. I mean, when the film came out, it was, and all those things hadn't been seen before.
Right. Well, what we did is sometimes the technology could be used to an advantage and to a disadvantage. Part of the technology that we used in The Right Stuff was in some ways based on cost. The picture was much more expensive to make than we had originally envisioned. But what happened on certain sequences, we found ways to cut costs. For instance, towards those of you who know the film, towards the end of the film, we have a flight of an F-16 fighter jet going straight up into the air. Well, we couldn't afford to hire a jet to do that and to have another plane following him and shooting the film and all that. We just didn't have the budget. So we had our special effects department build a model of the plane that was about this, put weights in the nose of the plane and throw it out of a window of a building, and then we reversed the film. So yes, we used some of those tricks, yes.
And well, you know, and innovation brings us to The Irishman, because
Yes.
I think that for this specific film, they you know, when the film was written and conceived, some of the digital effect were not even in existence.
No.
So can you tell us a little bit
Well,
about The Irishman?
when we decided to make The Irishman, we thought it would be, well, first we considered mostly the De Niro and the Joe Pesci characters go from from being 80 years old to 30 years old, or going backwards from 30 years old to 80 years old. Well, how do you do this? Well, ordinarily you would hire a younger actor, get hopefully DiCaprio to play the younger character, and De Niro to play his own age, or maybe go back to 60 and with makeup age him. We didn't want to do that. We thought we really wanted to use the same actor playing 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, and when he is 80. So we engaged George Lucas's ILM company to do a test where we would de-age the actors digitally. So what you'll see when you see The Irishman, which you'll, as I said, be hopefully in the fall in Italy, you'll see the same actors as they were when they were 30 and 40 and 50 years old through the process of doing de-aging. So that's an innovative. It's a long way from throwing that airplane out of the sky.
And the movie reunites you, Mr. Scorsese, and Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. I mean, how is a feeling of a reunion of that caliber?
I think it's one of the best films Scorsese made, and I think De Niro gives one of the great theatrical performances. What you saw up there on New York is a pretty risk-taking performance by an actor. You know, most actors really want to be embraced by the audience. They want to be loved. Bob played a character here that is very, very hard to really have sympathy for. By the way, part of the reason we made the film is when I originally developed the script, as I said, I had been in the management business and I represented a singer in New York, a nightclub singer, and she was pretty talented, but her name was always out front. Her name was Felicia Saunders, and her accompanist was her husband, and he was the piano player, and he was an incredibly talented jazz musician that always was just behind her playing the piano and never having the spotlight on him. And I always wondered what the relationship was between, she was the kind of star and he was incredibly more talented than she was, but completely below the surface. And that was the original intention of what Mac Roush's script was. And then Marty wanted to examine the creative process between all the different people involved. And that's where New York came from.
I like to open it to some questions. We see very little of you because the light is very strong. So if you have a question, raise your hand. There is one here.
Good evening. I'm curious about, you did a lot of films with United Artists, and I'm curious about your working relationship with them, especially Eric Plesko, and also the effect that Heaven's Gate had on that working relationship, and if you could tell some stories, perhaps?
Well, we were involved with the United Artists all through that period, and what happened was Pleskow was there in the time of Rocky, but Heaven's Gate caused a whole exodus of all the executives of United Artists. But what happened at the time, the studio, and it goes back to what you said about the chaos that was going on in the 70s. The new people that came in at United Artists after Pleskow and that group left to start Orion Pictures, Rocky was a big hit, obviously. They didn't want to make Raging Bull at all. They were dead set against making Raging Bull. We then told them that if they didn't make Raging Bull, we wouldn't make Rocky 2. So they were desperate to get another hit and to make Rocky 2. And we said we wouldn't do it unless you made Raging Bull. But that's the kind of chaos that was going on, as you referred to. So if not for Rocky, there never would have been a Raging Bull or a Rocky 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Not only is Martin Scorsese my favorite director, but I love Thelma Shoemaker as an actor. And I just wanted to ask, which films influenced you and what was your journey to become a producer and how old were you?
Well, I started producing, as I said, with an Elvis Presley film back in 1967. And it was an accident, as I said, because I came from the music management business. And then, again, I keep saying the chaos of that period. What happened was we got a hold of a script called Point Blank. Does anybody here know that film?
John Borman?
Yes. No.
Yes, no, there are several hands up.
If you haven't seen it, by the way, you get it. It's really very special. It stars Lee Marvin. But what happened, we got the script. At the time, no agent would pay attention to Mr. Charnoff and I because we were just these unknown guys that show up in Hollywood. As a matter of fact, my first day on the MGM lot to make the Elvis Presley movie, I didn't know anybody. I'd never been on a sound stage before. I'd never been in a movie lot before. And I was producing this movie, and it was my first day, and it was lunchtime. So I went to the commissary, and I asked for a table, and the maitre d', or the stewardess said, what do you do? And I said, well, that's kind of, I just want to get some lunch. What? She said, well, I don't mean to be impolite, but there's a table where the screenwriters sit, there's a table where the film directors sit, there's a table where the film editors sit, and there's a table where, the producers sit. I said, well, I'm a producer, I'd like to sit with the producers. She said, sure. And she took me to a table where the producers, and sitting at that table was Arthur Freed, who had produced all the An American in Paris, Gigi, all the great musicals, and people like that were at the table. And not one of them, not only didn't greet me, they wouldn't talk to me because they knew that there was a new generation of producers coming in. So that was the chaos. So by the way, and the studio assigned a director. They were still in that business of assigning a director to a movie. So they assigned a director by the name of Norman Turog. Norman Turog had directed Skippy and Boys Town. He went back to silent films. So I said, I'd like to meet the director. They said, okay, be on the steps of the Thalberg building tomorrow, and you'll meet we'll have him come, and we'll meet Mr. So a car drives up, and there's a chauffeur and a man sitting in the passenger seat, and the chauffeur gets out and runs around to the other side of the car and opens the door, and this elderly man gets up and kind of, they help him up the stairs, and I really have nothing to say to him. I introduce myself, and he's introduced to me, and I'm scratching my head, and I say, well, it's very nice that you have a chauffeur and all. And he said, no, I really would love to drive, but I can't. I said, you know, just trying to get small talk. I said, why not? He said, well, I can't see very well. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm blind in my left eye, and my right eye is going. So I said, wait a minute. I had a script here for Julie Christie, and it's going to star Elvis Presley. I have a director that can't drive, he can't even see, and this is my entry to Hollywood, and that's how I started. But Mr. Torre was a lovely man besides that.
Do I see a hand? No. Then yes, there is. Oh, there is. Okay. Oh, the last one.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for this movie, because I saw it many times on small screen, and this is my first time to see it on the big screen. It's absolutely impressed. I'm absolutely impressed. Thank you so much. But I'd like to ask you about Irishman. I'm a Russian distributor who is negotiating with Netflix to show this outstanding movie by Scorsese in Russia, and I hope we will show it in November, and you're absolutely invited if you wish to visit Moscow. Please do it. But I'd like to ask you about the creative freedom by Netflix compares to Hollywood studios in the Hollywood gold era. I mean, the creative freedom which Netflix get to you when you are working with Irishman, is it like in 60s in Hollywood?
Well, I don't think we'll ever see the 60s period again. I think none of the studios operate under the same kind of restrictions that the old studio system had. That went away a long time ago. And Marty has always had a great deal of creative freedom because everybody recognizes talent, and there's many directors that have that kind of control. Having said that, we found Netflix to be a great partner. Not only were they supportive, they were creatively involved in the best possible way, and very supportive, and very anxious to make movies. They love movies. So that isn't always the case now in Hollywood, when some of the big corporations are owning, you know, the studios. When the American Telephone Company, AT&T, owns Warner Brothers, you know, you have to worry about it. But I think Warner Brothers has the control, and you know, they had a film play here called The Joker, which I'm sure Todd Phillips enjoyed a great deal of freedom. Having said that, in answer to your question, Netflix has been terrific to us, both creatively and supportively.
And I'm told that we have no more time for questions, but Mr. Winkler very kindly put together a reel that we're gonna share with you. So, and you get to see, you visualize how big his filmography is, and how great, and how many brilliant films are very different from each other. And so don't leave. It's a little reel. It's a gift that he made to us, and we wanna thank him very much to be here, and for having made the New York